kilometres she'd been left by her husband. Her inheritance had made her one of the most asset-rich young women in the district. No one had thought she would be able to manage the property on her own, but she had, so far. She employed 2 stockmen to do a lot of the grunt work, and she wasn't afraid of getting her own hands dirty when push came to shove. But it was Gemma who made the decisions and ensured things ran smoothly. Despite what Adam had said, she had never had any intention of selling Billbinya after his death. Her land was good, productive land. It was just on the northern side of Goyder's line, but close enough to get a bit more rain than those areas further to the north of South Australia. The phone calls from the real estate agents had come thick and fast with offers, good offers, but the answer was always no. She would keep on farming. It was all she knew, and all she wanted to know. Her decision had caused surprise and resentment among the other landowners. While Adam had been by her side, Gemma's hands-on involvement with farming had been accepted. Now she was a single woman in a man's world, and this caused a wariness amongst the women of the district who had always been involved in the CWA, trading tables or tennis, rather than agriculture. The men looked at her with a mixture of respect and contempt. She knew that the men thought she couldn't manage the land on her own. As she was leaving the Hawkins and Jones stock agents and farm merchandise store one day, she heard one of them say, "She must have balls to take that on, but you watch. She'll get sick of playing farming when the money runs out. It'll end up on the market before long." If asked, Gemma would admit that running a large station was hard, but no one had bothered to ask. It would have been completely impossible without her dependable stockmen, Buller and Gary. They had worked overtime in the 6 months since Adam's death. They hadn't complained, but she was going to need more manpower so they could have some time off. Besides, there were places on Billbinya she hadn't been to in weeks, and goodness only knew what was going on with the sheep and cows in those areas. The station could use another bloke, she decided, and went about wording a situation vacant ad to run in magazines. Once the email had been sent, she turned to the bunch of bills and letters that had arrived in the last mail. Opening them, she felt her heart start to sink. Billbinya was running mainly wethers, with a few ewes to breed replacement stock, and some cows thrown in, and wool prices hadn't been good for a long time. Gemma was beginning to think that there would have to be changes in the enterprises she ran on the station. Obviously, wool wasn't going to make her the money she needed on its own, but she needed to work out what would, and how she could do it. By the time she'd updated May's debit and credits, reconciled the last month, and calculated the GST, the sun was just beginning to creep over the horizon. She stretched and got up. Walking to the doors that led from the office onto the veranda of the rambling homestead, she threw them open and breathed in the icy morning air. She'd stood at this same spot most mornings in the 8 years she'd been living on Billbinya. Billbinya was, for the most part, gently undulating country. Running through the middle of the station was a creek line with big old gum trees and moss-covered rocks. The homestead was snuggled into the bottom of a granite hill, surrounded by large gardens full of rambling ivy, geraniums and lawn. Pepper and almond trees were dotted all around the edge of the garden fence. Once there had been a vegetable garden with an orchard that had produced most of the food, but Gemma had let the garden go now that she was so busy on the station. The house itself was a stone construction with a tin roof, built by Adam's great-grandfather. The windows were small, but the house was of generous proportions, with 5 bedrooms, a dining room, formal lounge, and an expansive sunroom that looked out over the native bush that led to the summit of the mount. The side of the house where the office was situated opened out to the wide plains of the farming land. Gemma could see the dog kennels under the trees, and this early in the morning, all except her faithful work companion was still snoozing. Scooter sat outside his hollowed log, which passed for a shelter, with his